Great. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kyle Giunta. I run corporate marketing and communications for Sprinklr, and thank you everybody for being here today and on the live stream too. We're fortunate to have some terrific representatives from agencies here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second, but we've got Justin and Nevin and Tatiana, who's back for a second panel. So thanks for coming back. So we'll expect a great audience. You know, we might open it up to questions at some point during the conversation. So just be ready with those too. And Nevin, you want to start? Just a quick introduction on who you are, your firm, kind of clients that you work with.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Nevin Simpson. I've been kind of on the agency side my whole career, based here in Austin. Most recently, I worked at Edelman on the digital team there, so that's really kind of where my roots in social media come from. And when I was there, I worked on technology brands, B2B, consumer. Since transitioning to my new role at GSD&M, that's where I currently work. I'm a social media strategist there, primarily working on the United States Air Force recruiting account. So that's kind of my main focus right now, but also help kind of provide different strategic guidance to other clients within the GSD&M portfolio.
Hey everybody, I'm Tatiana Natzke. I am the Director of Accounts at Social Tribe. We are a social content and influencer marketing agency. We are 100% virtual and we are women-led. Currently we are an all-women team, although we do recruit men. And I am Director of Accounts there, so all of the clients in our portfolio ladder up to me. I'm in charge of making sure that we deliver seamlessly, have great execution, and maintain really great relationships with our clients.
And I'm Justin Chase. I oversee innovation and media at InTouch. InTouch is a global agency focused on healthcare and wellness, serving the pharma and biopharmaceutical space. Prior to that, have been at a number of different places, had my own agency for a number of years, but have played in consumer packaged goods and consumer electronics as well as health. So I think we're going to have a good and fun and exciting conversation.
Yeah.
And so very, very diverse background here. So I think one of the things to just kind of get us going is, you know, we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about digital transformation, and customer experience is a thing now that everybody is talking about. Just from the perspective of, you know, your agencies and some of the clients that you're working with, how would you say they're thinking about those things? What does that kind of mean for them? Nevin, you want to kick us off?
Start? Sure. I think, you know, GSD&M has traditionally been known as, you know, a creative, traditional TV shop over the years, but I think that's, you know, kind of a misconception because a lot of what we do, especially on the Air Force account, is heavily rooted in digital. We have extremely sophisticated digital media, digital marketing capabilities, an extremely strong social presence. And at the root of everything we do is ultimately the customer. And when it is kind of a recruiting-based environment, obviously we have to keep them in mind. And I think from a social perspective, we gain so much just from being able to listen to them and have that feedback loop, and really putting into place different strategies where we can facilitate that one-to-one communication is more important than it has ever been before. And so I think just as, you know, digital and social has become more of the forefront, we're just continuing to find ways to show our experience in that space as GSD&M, and just continuing to push our clients forward and really share a lot of the learnings that we have on Air Force with our other brands as well.
Yeah, so for Social Tribe, we work with all different kinds of brands, B2B and B2C, but we focus primarily in the B2B tech space for the enterprise. And when it comes to customer focus and customer first strategies, it's really about, number one is the great content and showing customers that your brand understands them and understands what they're going through and what their business challenges are. And the best way to do that is through fantastic content and through really meaningful storytelling. So influencer marketing has been around for a long time. It's only in the last few years that I think the technology has caught up where we can actually use that technology to measure it, et cetera. Customer marketing has also been around for a really long time. What we're doing right now is pushing the brands that we work with to really leverage their customers as their influencers. So how do you build really deep partnerships with your customers and help them tell the story of your brand, right? So instead of doing some overproduced, very, very slick marketing collateral or marketing videos that focus on your brand and your product, get your customers out there to talk about the issues that they're dealing with, the problems that they're trying to overcome in their businesses, and feature their stories and serve that up to your audiences as a value add. And position yourself as a brand that can help them overcome those challenges by letting your customers speak on your behalf. They're gonna trust your customers and they're gonna see like, hey, that's a brand that's up against the exact same thing that I'm up against. That's very, very meaningful to them.
I think in the vein of digital transformation, there's a term that we use a lot, and that term is modern marketing. Is anybody familiar with that term? Maybe data-driven creativity. Takes on a lot of different meanings, a lot of different shapes, and this is a term that we're kind of trying to take ownership of. But I think ultimately it focuses on personalization, how to create more personalized experiences for our audiences, and in healthcare it could be an HCP, it could be a patient, it could be a stakeholder group or caregivers, whatever the case may be. How do we create more personalized experiences? And then portable, how do we take a really mobile first view and employ that across whatever strategy we're driving? There's another term that is thrown around all the time at South by and conferences like this, and that term is authenticity. And I hate to even say that because
Everybody put it in the hashtag right now, hashtag authenticity.
don't do that, because my point is the exact opposite. And it's this, it's that who now believes, what business or brand thinks a good idea is to be inauthentic with their customers? Nobody. I feel like that's just par for the course. So how do we kind of take it to the next step? A term that we're using a lot and I like is relevance and anticipated relevance. And the whole idea of relevance is how do we create not necessarily authentic content. Of course it's going to be authentic. That's kind of table stakes. But how do we, with data, with insights, with better tech and marketing stacks, how do we know the consumer better, or at least as well as they know themselves, so that we're able to produce the most relevant content, experiences, environments, and then kind of to the how do we know them better than themselves point, how do we create anticipated relevance? So we're providing this experience before they even know that they need it. And I think this is very much a page out of like the Steve Jobs playbook, where the customer doesn't know what they want, we need to tell them what they want. That's very much like anticipated relevance, but with a pretty significant caveat. And the caveat is that somewhere between, kind of on the spectrum from, we're going to be so beholden to our data. We're going to collect as much data as humanly possible, and you should. At this point in time, we have the ability to do that. But somewhere between that, on kind of this end of the data spectrum or the data continuum, and we know the data, but we're really not going to, we're not going to look at it or consider it on this end of the spectrum. We're just going to do whatever we believe is right, and kind of trust our instincts. There's a happy medium somewhere in between those 2 points. And I think that's kind of where we need to play. And that's sort of the point of anticipated relevance, and connecting with consumers in such a way, or patients, HCPs, whatever the case may be, in such a way that we're anticipating their needs based on certainly our own instincts and experiences, but also the layers upon layers upon layers of data.
Tatiana mentioned a word that I want to bring back up here, and this is the idea of partnership. But before we kind of talk about it here, I just want to do a quick poll of the audience. How many of you are actually at an agency right now? Okay, about half.
Nice.
Maybe. How many of you are on the brand side and you work with an agency? I would imagine the other, okay, couple. So how many of you have ever, like on either side of that, had a tense conversation with either your agency or the brand? Imagine, yeah, pretty much everybody. So one of the things I wanted to kind of ask of this group is sort of, how do you, on the agency side, right, what are the fundamental pillars of building a strong partnership with your clients? And then just kind of transcending from that, how do they sort of look to you guys for value?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think I kind of am in a really unique situation on the Air Force account. We've been their agency of record for over 17 years, and so with that comes a ton of trust and partnership, and we really are client partners with them, and I think that just speaks volumes of the amount of collaboration that we are able to do. Our team is, just almost as has as much expertise as our clients does in their ultimate mission. And I think our team, we really take that to heart. And I think that's something that our clients really value, in that we really hear them and we know what they're after, and we're all on the same page trying to achieve the same objective. And so I think as an agency, the more that you really can listen and understand and speak their language and get on the same team and talk about how you can achieve the same thing together is invaluable. And to me, that's like the number one thing about working with clients, is trying to just get on the same page. We're all working towards the same thing here. We're all on the same team. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you said one word that is really, really the number one most important thing, which is listening. So as director of accounts, again, all the projects in our client portfolio ladder up to me, and I'm in the sometimes unenviable position where I do get to see a lot of our successes, but when a client's unhappy or frustrated, it gets escalated to me, and I'm the one who's in charge of coaching our team on how to respond. I'm looking over their emails. I'm trying to empower them to learn to get those skills on how to manage these situations on their own, right? And the number one thing that's the key is showing your clients that you hear them, that you're listening, and that you're, again, invested in the same end goal. It's a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not trying to be at loggerheads with you. We're trying to help you. And so one of the ways that we bring value, taking it from another perspective, is trying to anticipate their needs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Looking down the road and listening and understanding where is it that your business is trying to go. What a client might have come to us in January of 2017 and said that they're trying to solve a specific problem or they had a specific goal, that can look really different in July of 2017 or November 2017 or January 2018. So always listening, saying, what's the pressure that you're under? What are you trying to achieve? And helping them navigate and have a responsive strategy to help them get to that place.
So I think when you look at partnership from a client, an agency client partnership standpoint, it's difficult. And I think it's difficult because partnership and advancing that partnership and customer centricity can be at odds. And here's why. When you think about good agency partners, what you should ostensibly be doing is working with your client to advance their unique needs and objectives. But oftentimes, their unique needs and objectives are being measured by their own personal goals, right? Like, what are they being measured against? What is their objective as a senior brand manager at X company? And that particular goal might be very I don't want to say self-serving or self-aggrandizing. They need to do it. It's there for a reason. But that might not completely sync up with what the best customer-centric perspective or strategy is. So I think trying to figure out how those two things can coexist in such a way where they're both being advanced the right way is not at all easy. The interplay there can be tenuous. I think from a corporate standpoint, partnership is tantamount to success these days. How many people have heard the term open innovation? So open innovation is the concept that no one company can innovate on their own anymore. The world is changing too rapidly. Technology is evolving at such a pace. The skills that we're fluent in today are going to be obsolete in just a few years. So with open innovation, the idea is that we need to look to external partners to try to introduce innovation from other areas, from other channels, from other verticals potentially, to try to build impactful partnerships that are going to advance or evolve a business. I don't think that, when we talk innovation, is probably the most overly and inaccurately used buzzword.
More than authenticity?
Maybe more than authenticity. And I think the net is that businesses today talk about innovation as if, just advancing their product pipeline is innovation. That's not necessarily innovation. You have to do that anyway. Every business needs to evolve. Not every business needs to innovate or is equipped to innovate. But for those few businesses who do understand innovation and can get it right, partnership, I think, is critical these days because of all the things I mentioned before.
I think the one thing that we're definitely hearing across the board is that the only change or the only constant is change, right? And I think what's fascinating, and I'd love for you guys to be able to share your insights on this, is you all work across very different sectors, right? Military, high tech, pharma, each with their own unique set of challenges. Just kind of open it up, maybe you talk a little bit about what you're doing with some of your clients and some best practices that they're looking to you to help guide them through.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So, more specifically.
Yeah, maybe for you in particular, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier, Air Force and obviously looking to recruit, right? In a new world where social has fundamentally changed, right? The relationships between a brand, right, and their consumer in this case. So what does that mean, I guess, for Air Force and the way they think about going about and trying to solve the challenges that they've always had?
Yeah, and so I think from like a recruitment standpoint, obviously technology has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. And so, you know, we're way beyond targeting the millennials. We are very much focused in that Gen Z realm and teens. And so having that customer first mindset is extremely important for us. And speaking to them in their language, in their channels is crucial. Otherwise, I mean, you can't just speak at these kids anymore. They want to have kind of an authentic, here it is again,
Hashtag authenticity.
conversation.
We're going to get it trending. That's my goal right here. We'll just bring it back.
They want to have that authentic, you know, relationship and conversation with they're potentially signing up. They're signing up to serve their country. Like, we really have the ultimate marketing challenge, in my opinion, in convincing people that this is you know, a career path for them. So I think the more that, you know, we can adapt to the changing and innovation that is in the industry and speak to them in that one-to-one manner is really just kind of what we have to do every day. Like, we recently turned on like messaging on Facebook, and within 2 weeks we had over 1,000 inbound messages. So we know that there are trends, and how can you guide your clients to adopt those trends and to go down those paths. And that has been something that's been super successful for us. And again, we've been really lucky that our clients really listen to our guidance and our feedback, and are really challenge us to be the ones that push them to do those things.
Yeah, you said something that I think you brought up, helping navigate clients go through trends. It's the same for helping them navigate through the obstacles that come naturally from being in the digital marketing landscape. So everybody has heard the phrase, oh, we live in a digital economy and things are changing faster than ever before, but it's really true, and it's speeding up. And it's getting faster and faster, and it's tough for brands to keep up with this on their own. That's one of the major things that agencies can bring to the table, again, is helping them, you know, poke their head up out of the gopher hole of just their own company and bring to the table these industry trends and helping them navigate things. I mean, we are in not even all the way through Q1 of 2018, and already we've had a Facebook algorithm change, we've had a Twitter API change, which goes into effect in 2 weeks. How do we get ahead of these things and bring a proactive approach to tweaking their strategies, changing the way that they approach the different channels that they're reaching their customers on, and getting ahead of that. And
partnership, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you need to be so kind of in lockstep with a Twitter, with a Facebook, with a Google,
Right.
that you're able to actualize these changes as an agency before they're coming down the pike. I think that's such a big thing now, because clients expect, wow, we've finally gotten this Facebook thing figured out. We have rules and regulations, we have workflow, we have regulatory aligned, and, you know, all these internal stakeholder sets, but oh my gosh,
It's never figured out. It's
Exactly.
always changing. And it's the same for being an agency. So Social Tribe in particular, we call ourselves a Sprinklr shop. We're Sprinklr experts. That's one of the biggest values we bring to the table for our clients.
Hashtag endorsement.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Sprinklr.
Check comes after the panel.
But, you know, Sprinklr is a huge investment for a lot of brands. It's not inexpensive, and it's helpful to have a partner who has a close relationship with the organization, knows how these changes are going to affect their programs, and get ahead of them in case you're going to do a product update or something like that, so you don't throw your entire program into chaos, and then you're scrambling to figure out how to navigate through that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that, trying to convince any client, let alone a pharma client, that they're not at the center of their own equation anymore is not an easy conversation to have. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I think a more interesting thought is that, one, your consumers, your patients, other businesses, whoever you're marketing to, your audience, they don't care about you. They don't care about you. They don't care about your problems. They don't care about how you operate. All these things that you take a tremendous amount of time considering and strategizing over. They don't care about any of that. There's a term that has been thrown around, I think, more recently, and it's not as derogatory as it sounds. The term is consumer promiscuity. And not to suggest that consumers are doing like weird, crazy sexual things, although there's a lot of apps for that, maybe they are. But there's just this, hashtag no judgment. There's this.
That's the next panel.
There was a panel yesterday on how to build a vibrator kind of collaboratively over there. It was, yeah, I didn't go, but it looked interesting.
South by.
South by. But I think it's getting harder than ever. And by promiscuity, what I mean is disloyalty. There is this systemic disloyalty across the consumer landscape. And I know a number of companies believe that, well, we got to figure out this loyalty problem as if it's a problem. I think that genie's out of the bottle, right? Consumers are not going to be loyal again, not to the extent that they were, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. There's too much selection. The internet affords too much choice. And where Amazon maybe loses on price, they're winning to the greatest extent on just convenience, pressing a button, saying something. So, but still, it's unbelievably difficult to kind of regain that consumer loyalty. So instead of trying to make that our holy grail, I think we need to think about ways in which we can change the model. And to a point that you have talked about, and we'll talk about more because this is your business, and we're doing this in health as well because I think it's really critical, is the thought that influencers are the new loyalty program, right? Yeah. So we need to think about, and any marketer who has successfully deployed an influencer marketing program will talk about, and we were talking about it yesterday at our InTouch house, how unbelievable the ROI is on IRM programs. It's astounding. So instead of trying to kind of go back to the way that we used to do things, let's advance. Let's think of newer, smarter partnerships and areas of opportunity. I think when you think about influence and partnership, that's an interesting thought because if we can, in the healthcare industry and other industries, look at other partnership opportunities that afford us a way to connect to different influencer bases, different spheres of influence, that's an enormous win because there's only so many people that we can impact and influence in our own kind of siloed vertical. It's partnering with unexpected, new outside the box verticals that you'd never think healthcare would be partnering with. An example of that might be you look at Berkshire, JPM, and Amazon coming together to try to quote unquote fix healthcare. Strange bedfellows. Nobody would really think, a year or two ago that those three companies who have been fierce competitors in the past would come together to try to fix probably one of the greatest problems in our entire country, right? But if anybody can do it, it's, Buffett, Bezos, and Diamond. So there are these guys who, and girls and, cisgender people who are working together to try to figure out ways to really partner more successfully and find those areas of influence to build that loyalty. And I think loyalty, as you probably would attest, is key in that equation.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on something which is the concept of the influencer and how can we expand the definition away from the traditional influencer, which would be, the celebrity type. An influencer can be anybody these days. It can be an industry analyst. It could be a celebrity. It could be, an industry expert. It can even be your own employees and your customers or other partners. So how do you leverage all of those different voices and weave them into the fabric of your social program and let other people speak, stop speaking about your own brand. Let other people speak for you. That's what customers are going to trust.
Yeah, this idea of loyalty is really, really interesting. I think even implicit in that is something of a brand-centric view of the world, right? How do I create loyalty to my brand? I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier, the notion of providing value, right? And I think that's where the whole customer experience conversation comes back around, that you're talking about listening to an individual, really understanding what it is that they care about, and looking for those relevant, opportune times to be able to genuinely authentically,
Yeah.
right, provide value for them. But just
That's such a good point. That is an unbelievably good point, because what brands do now is they stand over you and they go, "This is my loyalty program, and it's me, 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 me." But no, it's their world. You're just living in it. And if you can figure out how to construct a loyalty program that's just kind of festooned or strung around all these existing sources of influence and people who have already established themselves as influencers, how do you, through them as conduits, and maybe it's through co-creation, maybe it's whatever the strategy or rather tactic might be, that's how you need to deploy it. And brands think, particularly in marketing agencies, I do actually think PR has done a bit of a better job at this, probably because PR understands how to build relationships with members of the media, which is actually not at all dissimilar from building influencer relationships. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and the ROI that you're going to get in week 1 or week 2 or week 8 is probably not going to be tremendously high. But if you construct it the right way and create a solid foundation and so on, that's kind of what you need to do. But you also need to realize that it's not your program. You need to figure out a way from a regulatory standpoint, from a legal standpoint, how to construct it in such a way that your internal compliance teams and bodies and lawyers are going to be comfortable with influencers doing what they do. And it's a very gray line. You want to have some semblance of control, but at the same time, once you take control, then it's just it's a slope of inauthenticity that you are skiing down full speed.
So I've got a couple more questions for our panelists, but I wanted to do a quick check-in to see if anybody's got any questions they want to offer up right now. So anybody have any quick questions? Okay, keep thinking. Otherwise, we're going to kind of come back to the conversation here. So the agency landscape, has changed a lot, right? You've got players like Social Tribe that have kind of been natively social from the beginning. You've got other bigger firms that are kind of moving into social and digital. Maybe from your perspective, for people who may be kind of evaluating agencies or just thinking about the relationships, how have you seen that space change, and maybe how do you think about it? I'm going to go right to you first.
Yes, I have thoughts.
I can tell. I see them bubbling out of you, yeah.
So Social Tribe, at part of our origin story is that we were 100% social. That's all we did. That was our specialty, or social media, and that's it. But over the years, we realized that you're at a tremendous disadvantage when you only work on one piece of the puzzle. So you can imagine if you're in a situation where you own the social media and the brand or the client that you're collaborating with, they're running a content marketing program or an influencer marketing program that isn't collaborating with you or isn't really churning out very good content, you're not going to be able to execute at the highest levels if what's feeding into your program isn't necessarily customer focused or customer centric, et cetera. And so we've actually had to sort of change our model so that we now approach not just social, but we look at customers and advise them on how to reorganize your marketing programs for approaching these different areas in a holistic way, and looking for the opportunities that naturally come by doing a content program that feeds into social and a social program that collaborates with influencer marketing. This is an ecosystem that needs to work together. So that's one of the shifts that we've had to change as an organization in order to be able to better deliver a better product for the clients that we work with.
And Evan, any similar thoughts?
Yeah, we're not social only. We are kind of more of a traditional advertising setup. So we have a media team, we have a research department, we have strategy, we have social, we have creative. And so I think the biggest kind of challenge for us in a more traditional setting is kind of how do we all come together and share those unique perspectives. And with us, we're lucky that we do represent all of the Air Force's marketing efforts. And so we do have access to end-to-end data. And so I think that the biggest challenge for us is how do we all collaborate and use it effectively? But we are able to kind of look at the marketing journey from end to end. And I was in some panels yesterday. It's just really bringing home the thought about having the customer champion and how important that is. And ultimately, I think that is invaluable when you are at an agency where everyone kind of has their eye on the ball, which might be a different ball. Like media is very focused on, delivering their impressions, doing this and that, and creative wants award-winning work, and social wants like social innovation ideas, and so I think it's kind of how can we ultimately again all come together, and I really do think it's that customer first viewpoint that is so important, because again, like all of us internally, we're working for the same mission too. So how can we leverage, the data that the analytics team has, that the strategists have, and use it comprehensively across our marketing programs?
And I'd say that's why your AOR or DAOR needs to own social. Content, RM, MCM, strategy, all of those kind of expertly stitched together to put together the ideal social program. I think so often social is siloed out, and it's not integrated to the extent that it should be. And it's just so critical from a strategic perspective. One of the things that in healthcare for years happened was there's this word repurpose, where content would be repurposed from other platforms or channels, or what's more and even worse, offline content would be repurposed for social or mobile or whatever the case may be. And the net was that it was just it was not a customer-centric experience at all. It was, let's figure out what we can do on this platform, and maybe this is the only thing that we're going to get approved, so let's just do it. And it was abhorrent, And I think what needs to happen instead is that social needs to have a seat at the table at the very beginning of the conversation, but it just needs to be really deeply connected to every other brand touch. When we talk about customer experience, the onus is on us to not just provide a singular customer experience, but to provide a holistic customer experience. The expectation for consumers now is that every brand touch point is going to be the best brand touch point ever. When you go from an Amazon ecosystem, from a Spotify to a healthcare experience, and maybe it's the little app that your doctor told you to download to get your test results. When you go from a Spotify or an Amazon to that, imagine the disparity, the dissatisfaction in a consumer is at an all-time high. The expectation is that that type of experience that envelops you, that anticipates your needs, that provides social connectivity and recommendations, to this little clunky thing that barely works on a mobile device, obviously that's terrible. So how can that social experience be plugged into your larger strategy so that it's amplified in such a way that there is no drop-off, there is no disparity, there's complete parity across all of those brand touch points, and a consumer would say, or patient or HCP, that this is a phenomenal experience. It's taking all of those different touch points into consideration. And there could be many, many, many touch points. So you need to have all the key stakeholders and constituents at the table for the duration of the process to really figure out how that experience is going to manifest across all platforms and channels.
So I wanted to get into something that's not on the list of questions, which I know is going to create a little bit of angst here, but and even more angst over the future, right? And prognostication. So if you could just reach into the bag a little bit and think about, the good news is if you're right about this, we'll dig it up in like 3-4 years, right, and say how brilliant you were. If not, we'll just kind of delete this from the internet. But just what you see for the future of agencies, right? Maybe just use yours as a bit of a projection, but what you think agencies need to have in their toolkit, either as actual tools or the way that they think about partnering with their clients. You don't need to plug Sprinklr.
But I can.
Yeah, but you're more than welcome to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I've been at the PR side of the house, I've been at the advertising side of the house, and from what I've seen from both of those experiences, from being in 2 different industries, but we're all working towards the same goal. So when I'm at the PR side, they're like, how can we do more creative? How can we do more digital? How can we do this? And then at the advertising side, it's how do we do more comms? How do we do comms planning? How do we figure this out? And so I think just in the future, we'll just continue to see that all agencies are trying to be able to offer the same services, whether you're PR, whether you're advertising, whether you're digital. You have to be able to speak to kind of the full gamut in order to be able to provide those holistic approaches for your clients. So you can be truly that partner for them that we've talked about. That's so important. And so I think, continuing to look into the future, we're all just going to get smarter and stronger, and our benches are going to get deeper in terms of the skills and expertise that we bring to the table. So who knows, there'll probably be a consolidation of agencies because we can't all fight for the same pots forever. And then I think you'll also start to see the rise of really niche specialties within the agencies as well. So that way you do have some differentiating points. Digital's been around and rising for a while now, and so I think we'll just continue to see the rise of specialties within each, and that'll be kind of more of a focus and selling point for agencies in the future.
To your point on everybody trying to do what everybody else does, I think is an excellent point. That I've literally, to your experience, been in similar scenarios where PR wants to be an agency, marketing wants to be PR. I think other folks who've experienced that would probably agree. It's getting more difficult than ever to differentiate, so much so that we all see these Ad Age, like every month comes out with a survey that speaks to clients really not thinking that any one of their agencies are unique, any one of them could be swapped out and they're completely interchangeable. Yep. I think one of the ways that we're going to see agencies continue to differentiate, there's been a little bit of this, I think there's going to be a whole lot more to your question, is through technology. Things like artificial intelligence and virtual reality, whatever the next thing is, and maybe it's not even either of those things, maybe it's something we haven't even thought of yet, but I think it's through better, more advanced, more evolved technology, understanding how to use that technology, how to deploy it in the right context to the right people, having that level of trust, because we've seen when tech companies go right to brands, there can be some significant issues because they don't necessarily understand, how to deploy in that context, or they don't understand the customers that they're speaking with. I can give one example, and not to be IBM hater in the house, but many pharma clients specifically are very dissatisfied with IBM implementations, specifically Watson implementations over the past couple of years. So what can we do as agencies to kind of own that interface so that we are not general contractors, but we are facilitators and the experts on tech and how that tech manifests throughout one of our clients.
That's a great point. I think it's definitely something I was going to bring up too, which is the role of the agency as tech facilitator. Technology is not cheap. It's a really big investment for a lot of brands. And sometimes brands make investments in technology and don't have the infrastructure in-house to make the most of that investment. They'll use maybe 50% of the functionalities and then leave the rest on the table. And that investment comes up every year. It comes up for review, and they're always asking, are we making the most of this investment? If you work with an agency who understands that technology, they're making sure that you're using every bit of your investment to the best of its advantage, to the best use for your brand. And then another thing that's along the same lines as to your question, which is what do agencies need to have in your toolkit, the most important thing today and moving forward is metrics and reporting. If you cannot draw a dotted line between the work that you do as an agency to business value, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And anybody can go into a tool and pull metrics and numbers and put them together in a deck and send it to a CEO, but how do you take those numbers and explain what they mean? How do you take the numbers and provide meaningful analysis and actionable insights to your clients and say, okay, engagement is down this month. Why is that? What did we do differently? What has changed in the landscape? How do we need to change our strategy this month, and doing it on a regular basis? You don't wait for the end of the quarter. You do it every month. You do it regularly. And you also do it quarterly, half yearly, and yearly, so you can look at micro trends and macro trends so that the brand can keep up with the times and it can keep pace with the way digital is changing.
So data also. We talked about tech facilitators, data purveyors, knowing and understanding how to use data, I think, the right way. There's swaths and swaths of data now available. When you think about procurement, it's become such a race to the bottom with agencies. So how do you prove not just to your brand clients, but also to procurement? And I think one of the answers to that question, obviously, is data and insights, being able to effectively create an ROI model that will sure wow the brand people, but at the same time you get some head nods with procurement. So, and it's just so critical right now because of that that parity across agencies. So if you have not necessarily better data, I think everybody at this point in time, probably for the most part, has access to the same data sets, but it's can you figure out a way to find more or better diamonds in the rough than another agency or contractor or so on.
Yeah.
So it's about, for agencies, bringing your specific expertise, be it in a vertical or a specific focus area, and applying those with the insights from the data that your customers have and being able to work all those things together.
There's one more thing that you made a comment about a lot of these organizations saying that they could just swap out their agencies. They all look the same. They all do the same thing. One of the things that I think is really important for agencies to also focus on is the importance of people, the people that you hire, and the relationships that you have with your clients. One of the things we focus on a lot at Social Tribe and the training that we give the people who work for us is how do you make your clients love you? And not just how do you make them love Social Tribe, like how do you make them love Nevin and Tatiana and Justin? Because again, agency investments come up every year, and if your stakeholder loves working with Nevin, they will fight tooth and nail to make sure that your agency gets hired again because they don't feel like they could do the job without you or without me or without you. Yep. So making sure that those relationships are rock solid is really, really critical.
It's funny that you mentioned it. I was just thinking, so on the, I guess technically on the brand side, because I have agencies that we work with as well, and one of the things that we're always talking about is how do we be the best client that we can be, because we know too that there's talent inside of great agencies that are working on an abundance of different clients, right? So we want them to love Sprinklr, to feel like an extension of the team and to be motivated to kind of work as hard and be as proactive as we would be internally. So it's an interesting, I think, two-way street, which does come back to a bigger question and item that we've been hearing on lots of different panels over the last couple of days, which is the battle for talent, right? And really finding great people. So a lot of great people in the audience. Questions. I'm going to call on somebody if you don't ask one.
He'll do it.
I really am going to do it. Jim Tomanchek, do you have any questions?
I think, to Kyle's point, I would always wonder, I'm seeing a lot of brands bring agency talent into their own organizations.
Poaching.
So they can understand that landscape.
You just got the...
I've been seeing a trend of a lot of brands bring in agency folks so they get a better understanding of not just doing what you do, but actually working with you better. Do you see more of that consolidation of brands bringing in agency talent to not do these services, but just work with you guys in a more meaningful way across the entirety of the customer experience?
How do you mean, like, when they actually like get your talent and hire them as in-house people, or?
Yes.
That actually hasn't happened to us yet. I know that has happened to a lot of agencies. Yeah. It's a big trend. It hasn't happened to us. We're relatively small, and the people who work with us really like working with us, and they, really enjoy the model that we provide and the culture that we have. So maybe somebody else can speak to that.
I totally agree. I think it does happen all the time. I think it's always happened. It's kind of historically been something you need to watch out for. But at the same time, as much as it could, be perceived as a negative, I always think of it as a positive, because that's someone that, worked with or for or whatever at my agency. They better now give me that account once they go over to that client. That's a fantastic opportunity to have a foot in the door. I think one of the things that we as agency people need to guard against probably more fervently is, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but less concerned about PR, but the bigger, consultancies trying to position themselves as agencies and try to develop service models that look and feel very similar, hire the same people. When a consultancy starts to hire people out from under me, that's when I start to get very concerned. Are we doing something wrong? Do we need to change? Do we need to grow and evolve? Because in that instance, if they, are building a new practice and they've hired an entire team of mine, it's probably gonna be pretty good practice. So, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. At advertising agency life, even at my last PR firm, frequently people went over to the client side, and I think it is a trend that happens quite a bit, but I think you also have to keep line of sight into what the full agency brings to the table, because while this person might be a great fit and a team collaborator with you internally, there's also still a lot of services that a specific individual probably can't bring. So while it does happen, I think it's not necessarily the end of the world, and a lot of times it can even kind of strengthen the relationship between an agency and a brand.
Any other last questions out there?
I want to
Yeah, sure.
maybe close the loop on partnership and influence, because I think those are two key areas that we talked about and maybe could underscore a bit more. One of, I think, and this is not at all a health example, one of the examples that really of partnership and influence, the proliferation of the internet and internet business that really has raised my eyebrows in the past couple of years. One of the very few industries that has really not been disrupted by the internet is the art industry, or art in general. Art is really, it's the same as it was 10 years ago. And where the internet has radically disrupted almost every single other industry that it's touched, really hasn't done that with art. And so I started to think about, well, why has this happened? And for a whole variety of different reasons, but one of the ways in which it has been disrupted, I'll mention because I think it's really interesting. There is this emergence of street art that happened a few years ago. There's a street artist named Kaws, K-A-W-S. Anybody know who this guy is? Yeah. Really wild stuff. And the guy is so unbelievably popular, very kind of in the same vein as a Warhol. He's designed Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade floats. If you've ever seen a Mickey Mouse with the eyes X'd out, if you've ever seen Simpsons characters with the eyes X'd out and kind of the skull heads, that's all Kaws. So he basically took street art, kind of evolved it to pop art, used the internet to do this, and then through really smart partnership, and he had an unbelievable following, right? So his sphere of influence was very strong in the art world, but he wanted to kind of commercialize that and find a better and more scaled distribution model. So he partners with H&M. And I feel like in the States, we don't necessarily understand how big H&M is. H&M is the second largest retailer in the world, behind only Zara, right? And Zara is owned by a Spanish holding company. H&M, of course, is a Swedish company. This is like $222+ billion in revenues. Massive company, okay? So H&M does this partnership with Kaws, and all of a sudden, this art that was unbelievably inaccessible, there was really no intersection with the internet, is now all over H&M. But it's so popular that these $20 t-shirts are selling out in minutes, and then you see them on eBay minutes later for 3 or 4 times the price. So this guy, cool artist, maybe not some of our taste, maybe, it's very cool, check it out, like on Google. Kaws companion doll should be your search query. They're wild. But he basically made this whole art world accessible through smart partnership, through the integration of the internet, through merging spheres of influence. So all of the kind of the t-shirt heads and junkies and folks who follow fast fashion trends set by H&M. So the fashion bloggers, which are an incredibly tight-knit community, are merging with the art community and creating this whole kind of amalgamation of partnership and influence. I think that's a really cool model, because partnerships like that are going to start to shape the way that other industries you might not necessarily think would come together. They're going to start to set the blueprint for things like that.
So I think it's a lesson in paying attention, in listening, and understanding how much is out there, and understanding too that influence comes in lots of different forms, right? So if there's no other, I guess, last questions here, I just want to thank our panelists for a great conversation, and thank everybody for joining us.